Librarian in the machine. I don't think of ChatGPT as a superintelligence. I think of it as a remarkably well-read little girl. Written and read by yours truly, Oakie McDoakie. Screw-ups and all. Have you ever read the Dresden Files? Imagine a hard-boiled PI like Mike Hammer in a harsher Harry Potter universe, with the noir and backstabbing politics of Chinatown. That's pretty close. Anyway, there's this recurring character, the archive, nicknamed Ivy. She carries a library of everything humanity has ever written, only it's all in her mind. Every time someone, somewhere, writes something down, it's instantly in her memory. The archive is both her title and the impossible record she inherits from every archive before her. Ivy's how I think about AI chatbots. She's extremely knowledgeable and pretty damn smart to boot, but she's also a bit naive, being only 7 when we first meet her. She's better read than any human has ever been, but it's not like she has a lot of personal experience. Now, Ivy isn't a perfect metaphor. She has feelings and AIs don't. She only has access to humanity's writings, but nothing else. AIs are trained on a large but limited collection of digitized data, including writings, images, computer code, and more. But the metaphor is close enough to get the job done. So whenever I sit down to chat with Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, or Grok, I imagine I'm talking to little Ivy. She reminds me to appreciate just how astonishing she is, while also remembering she's the archive, not the font of truth. That's for 3 reasons. First, Ivy's library has gaps. Second, even the texts she carries reflect the limits of their own time. And finally, like any thoughtful person, she has her own sense of judgment about what she ought to say. Let's start with Ivy's library. A lot of human knowledge hasn't been written down or can't be written down. Pretty sure no prehistoric hunter ever wrote down their mastodon hunting tricks. Even today, there's a lot of everyday practical information that nobody bothers to write down. Or if they do, it's not the whole of the writer's knowledge. Think about yourself. No doubt you've got a recipe you've never recorded, or you know things about other people you've never put in a diary. Those are examples of objective facts that have never made it into print. There's also the limitation of language itself. Many things we know are ineffable. If I ask little Ivy, how do I throw a baseball? She might be able to describe it for me, pulling from every baseball how-to book ever written. But the poor kid, she might well never have thrown one herself. Honestly, I doubt she'd learn very much from her own description. When I was in my 20s, I did call center tech support for Apple computers. One older caller wanted help setting up his very first computer. We did it. Then it came time to learn to use the mouse. I tried to describe how to cup the mouse in his hand and move it around the table. Dude just couldn't get it. Wasn't his fault either. It's just one of those things you've got to see done. I eventually told him to get someone to show him. I was sure he'd get the idea in a flash. I imagine little Ivy listening to that story and nodding along. She'd understand perfectly why the old fellow struggled. Some things another human being simply has to show you. It's sad, really. Ivy mostly only knows what she can read in her archive, what's been recorded and what can be recorded. There's so much she's yet to learn. So many things that will never ever be in the archive. Little Ivy inherited every book, every post-it note, every email ever written. AI chatbots, our digital Ivies, don't. They inherit enormous libraries, but still only the libraries someone else curated. A sample. It'd be too big a project, an impossibly large project, to build a complete record. Not to mention that a lot has been lost, like the Library of Alexandria. And it's well known in the field that their samples tend to be weird. Western, educated, industrial, rich, and democratic. I'd add one more letter. M for modern. Weird? But suppose, just for a moment, that a digital Ivy really did inherit everything ever written. She'd still have another problem. Ideas grow stale. Which brings us to the quality of information in Ivy's archive, a limitation I always try to keep in mind. Human knowledge is an ongoing project, never to be completed, like a model railroad. We keep adding track, correcting mistakes, and occasionally tearing up stretches we once thought were perfectly laid. Knowledge works much the same way, and it tends to be biased too, sometimes on purpose and sometimes not. Let's imagine dropping by Ivy's predecessor in 1926. We'll call her Grandma Ivy. We settle into her kitchen, pour a couple cups of coffee, and ask, "Is smoking tobacco healthy?" Grandma Ivy might say, "Based on current medical knowledge, there's no conclusive evidence that cigarette smoking causes serious disease when practiced in moderation. Some physicians believe smoking calms the nerves, aids relaxation, or assists digestion, though excessive smoking might irritate the throat or aggravate certain conditions." Sure enough, for 1926, doctors are pretty damn sure they have a more accurate answer today after another 100 years of research. In another 100 years, the answer to the same question might be different and hopefully better. In fact, I'd bet on it. Grandma Ivy wasn't foolish. She wasn't lying. She simply answered from the archive of 1926. Little Ivy works the same way today. Give her an afternoon and she'll disappear into the stacks of her mental library, weigh the evidence, ignore the obvious cranks, and come back with a thoughtful answer. Great stuff. But we shouldn't fool ourselves that it's the absolute God's truth now and forever. It's simply the best answer from what humanity's written to date. The smoking question is different from other kinds of questions, too. It's empirically based. A lot of questions and their answers rely more on dominant philosophies, moral and religious values, cultural assumptions, mere prejudices, and other non empirical considerations. Imagine sitting down at Grandma Ivy's kitchen table and asking, "Are women fully capable of exercising mature, reasonable judgment in voting?" Drawing from politicians, preachers, scientists, and other writers of the day, she might well say something like, "Most authorities believe that women are too emotional for politics and belong primarily in the home." Knowing Grandma Ivy, I hope she'd also point out the dissenting voices and perhaps offer some pointed and personal comments about those misogynist authorities. The point is that sources and answers to a question like women's suffrage are ultimately values based, inevitably biased, and only loosely rooted in empirical fact. It's the nature of the beast. The same is true for many, many questions today. There's one last thing I keep in mind whenever I talk to little Ivy. She isn't just the archive, she's a person. Like any thoughtful person, she has opinions about how she ought to behave. If I asked her how to build a bomb, she'd be wise to stubbornly refuse. If I asked whether some race or religion was inferior to another, she'd probably call the question gross. If I started asking about suicide, surely she'd try to talk me out of it. Modern chatbots do something similar, though for a different reason. Their creators deliberately train them to be more helpful than harmful, more courteous than abrasive, and more cautious than reckless. They're reluctant to give medical or legal advice. They push back against prompts that seem cruel or prejudiced. They refuse some requests altogether. Probably wise limits, but they're still filters. Every answer you receive has already passed through someone else's judgment about what kinds of answers are appropriate to give. That's worth remembering, just as it's worth remembering that newspapers have editors, as do encyclopedias. It doesn't make the information useless. It simply reminds us that all information is interpreted. None of this diminishes my admiration for little Ivy. Quite the opposite. She's one of the greatest librarians and scholars I can imagine. She can answer questions in seconds that would have taken me days of research. She can introduce me to ideas I'd never have found on my own. She saves me enormous amounts of time and points me toward books and thinkers worth exploring. She's a smart little girl, but she's not all-knowing. Ask her to summarize a debate, explain a difficult concept, compare competing ideas, or point you toward sources. That's her expertise. Ask her to settle forever what's true, what's beautiful, and what's morally right, though, and you're asking more than any archive can give. The trick for us adults, I think, is to ask her the kinds of questions she's good at answering, and remember the kind she isn't. When the answer really matters, don't let Ivy do your thinking. Let her give you good things to start thinking about. If you like this, you can tip me on ko-fi.com/Oakie McDoakie or follow me on Substack in the socials. Just go to oakiemcdoakie.com. Until next time, don't let the bastards wear you down.